Happy Easter! In honor of this day, I'm wearing my Easter bonnet. You remember Pat and Imogene from the Rougemont Christmas Parade all those years ago? Well, I dug it out. Today is a day of celebration, and so I wanted to be celebratory and maybe a little bit goofy, but that's what you get when you've been cooped up for a couple of weeks. Today, we have come to the story that is at the center of our faith. And we're going to look a little bit more deeply at the scripture part of it based on our Sunday school lesson. I don't know if that's backwards. That's probably backwards, but anyway, y'all know what it is. I hope that you got a chance to go to the Easter sunrise service that Josh did. I hope you got a chance to do that, and I hope you'll get to worship as a community today, even though it's virtual. So, at Easter sunrise, one of the things we celebrate is the fact that Mary Magdalene and the, quote, other Mary went to the tomb at dawn. So, right as the sun was rising, the sun was rising. See what I did there? The Son of God had risen as the sun was rising. So most of the first Christians were Jews, and so they had always celebrated the Sabbath on the seventh day of the week, which is Saturday. Then by the 4th century, Sunday worship became the main thing. So before they would worship on Saturday, then it became Sunday, and it even became like a law. Emperor Constantine made it a law that worship was on Sunday. So on this resurrection day, Mark tells us that Jesus's body had already been anointed for burial. Actually, Matthew tells us that. So we know what that means is we know that the women did not go to the body they didn't go to the tomb to anoint the body. Many women had been kind of keeping a vigil over Jesus's body from the time of his death. It said that was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So then the question is, and that's from Matthew, so the question is, who is the other Mary that was with Mary Magdalene? It could have been Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Well, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, is also the mother of Jesus, so that's a possibility. But then why didn't Matthew just say Mary, the mother of Jesus? We don't know. One thing is clear is Matthew focuses on the women, that the women were the ones who stayed. They stayed with Jesus and they visited the tomb, and they were the first witnesses. That is pretty significant. So, looking at verses 2-3 in our passage today, the temple curtain was torn and an earthquake split the rocks. So look in your email, there's a picture of a split in the rocks. This is from a 1st century part. It's actually underneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it shows where rocks were split in the 1st century. So there is actual archaeological evidence of that. Then Matthew says the stone was rolled away by an angel from the Lord who came down from heaven and showed the women that the tomb was empty. So that's interesting. The angel rolled the stone away in Matthew. You can look on your email and you'll see a picture of what the stone might have looked at like. A massive, massive piece of rock, very, very heavy. But it's interesting when you think about it, because if the angel rolled the stone away for the women, that means that either Jesus, resurrected Jesus, passed through the stone, or Jesus opened the tomb, and then closed it behind him. And why not? I mean, why not? Doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter exactly what happened. We know that there were guards around the tomb and that they were terrified. He says they shook with fear and became like dead men. And then our teacher notes that dead Jesus rose to live, and living guards fell down as though they were dead. It's likely these were Roman guards that were put there to make sure that nobody went and stole the body. So the angel talks to the women, not the guards. And remember, women had very low citizenship status back then. So that's for the angel to speak to the women and not the men was very significant. But the women were afraid, and we know that because the angel says, "Do not be afraid." And it was pretty common in the Old Testament for the angels to say, when they encountered humans, to say, "Do not be afraid." So you wonder, did these angels just look supernatural, or do they look kind of fearsome? We don't know. Doesn't matter. They're very reassuring. Don't be afraid. So then the angels are talking to the women, and we wonder, where was Jesus right there? And the angel says, he isn't here. Why isn't he here? Because he's been raised from the dead. This is the great declaration of the gospel. Jesus has been raised from the dead. The angel then reminded the women what Jesus had already said, that he would rise again. He predicted his resurrection at least 3 times, although the disciples really struggled to believe that. And still, so the women are standing there, and they're still so surprised that this could be true, that the angel says, "Come and see the place where they laid him." And if you look on your email, there's a picture of a 1st century tomb that would have been around the time of Jesus's death. They don't actually believe this was the site, because this tomb was used. They know it was not at the time, it was older than that time. And we know that from the Bible that Jesus's tomb was new. It had not been used before Jesus. So this is not likely his tomb, although a lot of people believe it is. But what's neat about it is you can see what it would have looked like. This is pretty accurate of what it would have looked like. And you can see where he would have laid. He would have been in the farthest spot. And there are lots of reasons for that, that I won't go into here. So they saw the empty tomb, but they were still doubting. They weren't going to feel completely sure until they met the risen Jesus. But the angel said in verse 7, "Hurry, go and tell." And he told him, he's been raised from the dead. He's going on ahead of you to Galilee, and you will see him there. So the angel kind of told them what to say. He's gone on ahead. And now we can say he's gone on ahead into a new creation, and we will see him someday. So the words are for us as well. So Mary Magdalene and the other Mary set off on their mission with great fear and excitement. Some translate excitement as great joy. That's the one our version does, great joy. Some say great excitement. The only other time Matthew's gospel uses that description of excitement or great joy is when the Magi see the star. That's kind of cool. So just when you thought the story couldn't get any better, we read that Jesus met them and greeted them. Just stop for a minute and imagine what that's like. They're already overwhelmed by this news that Jesus has risen, and then they run into him. These women were the first ones on earth to carry the news of the resurrection, and they were the first ones to see the resurrected Jesus. And it's interesting that Matthew used pretty plain language for all of this. He doesn't describe Jesus as this kind of shining figure. He uses common, and Jesus speaks to them in common everyday language. It's just pretty ordinary, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, Jesus is coming to have a relationship with us, not to lord over us, not to frighten us, not to awe us, although we should be in awe, but to have a relationship with us. And that's good. And then Jesus reminds them in verse 9 that the same resurrected person that's standing in front of them is the one who was crucified. It's the same one. And they reacted to Jesus differently from the way they did to the angel. The angels, they were terrified, but to Jesus, they came and grabbed his feet and worshiped him. Grabbing his feet, you can imagine they would have been on the ground prostrate, which is a supreme form of submission and worship, really. And they remind us that worship should be our first and main response to the gospel message of resurrection. So Jesus' instructions were the same or similar. Don't be afraid, go and tell. He called the disciples brothers, and that's kind of striking because the last time he saw the disciples, they were running away in fear. Except for Peter, who denied him, and Judas, who betrayed him, the rest of them, and John kind of stayed close by, but The rest of them ran away. So the women would now carry a message of forgiveness and reconciliation, but because by calling them brothers, he's saying he forgives them. And he says, I will see you in Galilee. And there's a picture in your email of the Sea of Galilee, and it's at the spot where Jesus called his disciples. So it's not unlikely that that's where he met them again. We don't know. So think about, what does the resurrection mean to you? What does the resurrection mean to you? And now go back to your email and finish with the written part of the lesson. And happy Easter. And I miss you guys so much.